Hi everyone. So my name is Henni. I'm broadcasting from my dining room, and I'm a molecular virologist. I did my graduate studies, both my master's and my PhD, uh, studying RNA viruses that cause fatal human disease. And I'm just briefly going to talk about some points and common things I've been asked about in the past month with regard to the coronavirus outbreak that currently is going on, this pandemic that's kind of taken over the world. So where did it all begin? We see news and media constantly, and a lot of it is fake. And how do we distinguish? Well, I can tell you it did not begin with this. And even though this looks very convincing, because they go into saying how the specific patient that is patient 0 and his father is ashamed. And yes, I'm going to tell you the headline here is that Chinese health authorities March 27 had confirmed patient 0 had sex with bats. Yeah, not where it began. And even it goes into the Chinese authorities. Sorry, I'm having bad allergies. The Chinese authorities are giving fines to people that are practicing this behavior. I can tell you straight up, this is fake. So where did it begin? Coronavirus phylogeny, this term phylogeny, it's basically studying based on genetics where things came from. So they looked at the previous SARS outbreak from 2002, and they saw that the identity to this virus is only 75 to 80%, which is how they knew this is a different virus, and it didn't seem identical to the coronaviruses that we know. And yes, there's a family of coronaviruses of which some of them infect humans and cause the common cold, but this virus was different when it was assessed in China where this outbreak began. And they said, okay, this is a novel coronavirus. And then they had to do this phylogenetic analysis, and they found that it's genetically clustered with beta coronaviruses along with 2 bat-derived strains, meaning that it is very close to viruses that infect bats, and they found it to be 96% identical to these other bat coronavirus samples. Furthermore, they found that it is 99% similar to viruses found in an animal called pangolins. If you've ever heard of a pangolin before now, I'll be surprised because I never heard of it. They're found in Africa and Asia. They kind of are anteaters with a shell on them. Some claim that they look like armadillos, and this is possibly the intermediary host for the virus, and I'll explain in a minute what that means. But basically, there is some shift in the viruses where we see that it originated in bats and underwent some mutation, and this happens in viruses. We've all heard of evolution, so there's some mutations that occur, and some of them, most of them are not beneficial, but some of them give an advantage for the mutant to overcome some obstacle in the surroundings. Sometimes it's just the case of this mutant now that happened in bats no longer is beneficial in bats, but since this bat is in proximity to another animal, in this case, let's say the pangolin, this mutant can now infect this pangolin. So it's not beneficial to infect bats and no longer is infecting bats or finding, or maybe just at a low percent, but it's infecting pangolins now. Same idea with pangolins, a mutant in the pangolins, and these pangolins being in close proximity to humans now is able to infect humans and may no longer infect pangolins or infect pangolins, but actually not cause disease. So there are these cases. Now I can go more in depth into this. I can actually talk about this for hours, and my full lecture that I've been giving is built to be about 15 minutes in our lecture, and I'm doing Q&A, but I just kind of want to give you the basic and key points because I'm being asked. So hopefully this gives some information, and then feel free to contact me. My email is on this presentation. So what we think happened here is that there was this cross from bats, most likely to pangolins, and from pangolins to humans. Now, how did this spill off occur? Spill off, kind of like a term in virology where it all started supposedly at this I guess, seafood market in Yunnan in China, and it's a market that also has exotic animals and wild animals, and they basically have them alive in cages, very crowded conditions, and you see that there's proximity also to humans, and this allows for this kind of weird spillover, kind of a hotbed for microbes and infestation. And so these viruses that can have these mutations are then close enough to be able for that one mutant, for example, to infect this neighbor pangolin, and at the same time from the humans. So it also didn't come from someone eating bat soup or pangolin soup. It actually most likely came from a transfer of either body fluid or through feces, which is also transferable. So we're seeing this occur in this kind of situation. Just another note, how is this occurring in this cases with viruses is we think evolution takes a long time, but a virus life cycle can be over a day. And in a host, if you have in one day a virus that's replicating, you can get in one day 10,000 viruses. So if you get, let's say, a mutant a day, that would be like the rate about. So with HIV, then all you need is one day, one mutant to be beneficial for this change. Now, this whole, conspiracy theory going on, if we're looking at the pangolins, are they scheming and attempting human population control? Or no, there's no conspiracy. It is not a design virus, or would have been the worst bioweapon ever designed. So let's kind of get rid of that idea. Now, what do we need to know? Let's say in Tel Aviv, there are bats everywhere. Should I be worried about the bats and, them passing this virus to me? Well, yes, if you're scared of being pooped on. But otherwise, it's not just that they're gonna bite you or the virus is just gonna fly from their mouth to yours. It's not the case. Most of the time, this doesn't occur, and it needs to have this special situation as in that live market where they're just in close proximity, bad conditions, the animals are under stress. We know that stress really hinders the immune system, even in animals, and then there's more cases that you're prone to disease, and there's kind of feces everywhere, and it's just not a great situation, but it's not a normal situation. So the other thing, something that's been brought up, will drinking bleach kill the coronavirus? Well, yes, but it will probably kill you too, or cause damage to your internal organs, so let's not drink bleach. As for going back to that headline that I started with, what about sex with animals, bats, pangolins? Well, guess my answer. I'd say yes, if you're a bat or a pangolin, but otherwise, let's stick to our own species and only with consent. Pets, the other question. I am fostering the cutest 2-month-old puppy right now, and I had her in my arms, and someone said to me, "Oh my God, I can't believe you're holding her and letting her lick you." And okay, so there was another headline, as you see here. First dog with confirmed coronavirus infection has died, but we don't know if it was because of the virus. Well, we do know. It was most likely not because of the virus. I'm a biologist. I will never say 100%, but generally, it is not something that jumps between species in that way, even when we're talking about animals and zoonosis. And this term zoonosis, sorry, I threw it out there. But that zoo, the word zoo, right? It's like we go to the zoo, that's where animals are. Zoonosis just means that it's the ability to move between animals and humans. So what's up with this dog? First thing, as a virologist, my thought was like, okay, obviously her owner was sick and probably in a state of very sick. And if they check the dog, it means the owner got to the hospital and had the dog with her because no one could care for the dog, or they had the, healthcare staff be at her home, and this dog, if anyone knows dogs, has this sick owner. What is a dog going to do? It's going to come and lie next to the owner and continuously lick the owner, and the owner is coughing and in bed. So probably this dog just licked the owner, and in its mucus had virus. Not that the virus is actually infecting the tissue of the dog, but it was just present. And for common testing that we're doing currently for diagnosing people. It's based on the genetic material of the virus. So even if the virus was not able to infect the dog, even if the virus is dead, the genetic material will still currently be in this mucus that they took from the dog. So that is most likely the answer. Now, why did the dog die? Well, it says it's a 17-year-old Pomeranian. Does anyone know how long dogs live? Well, they say 1 year in a dog is 7 human years. So let's say 17 times 7, that's like, you know, we're talking about over 100 years old. And smaller dogs don't live as long as bigger dogs. 17 years old is very old for a Pomeranian. So this poor cute little dog had a nice long life with a wonderful owner and probably just died of old age and was alongside this 60-year-old woman that got sick with the corona, and that's why they found viruses in the mucus of the dog. In the same article, it said, so should the public worry about picking up SARS-CoV-2? This is the name of the current virus that's causing this pandemic, from their beloved pets or their furry companions falling ill. Experts still say no. Moreover, these pets are making us happy, and we're in isolation right now. It actually gives us a better mood and alleviates stress, which means our immune is stronger. It is better for any outcome that has to do with isolation in this pandemic. Now, furthermore, to explain, viruses are very specific in their target. Not only are they specific for the species, they're specific for a cell type. Coronavirus 2 will infect cells of the respiratory tract or the intestinal tract. Generally, that's why we see that it causes a disease that seems like a cold or the flu, because it's infecting those cells. So it's not just going to infect random other animals and random other cell types. So we need not worry about having our little pets with us. Other animals may encounter them, but not get productive infection or spread it. Okay, so what would be the take-home message from this? Sanitation is key. Don't be hysterical, be responsible. Don't believe everything you hear on the news. Definitely don't believe everything you read on the internet. I say avoid the news of the internet altogether, because really what you're gonna know how many more people got infected today, you're gonna hear that this many people died or that it reached another country. In practical terms, it's not gonna affect how you behave. I'm going to go over how you behave or you should behave, and that's probably what you've been hearing all this time. Let me just clarify one thing that I want to say. The current coronavirus outbreak, this pandemic, is caused by SARS-CoV-2 virus. What does this big thing mean? Well, initially in China, they called it the novel coronavirus because they found that this was in December 2019 because it was novel, but it was causing similar symptoms to the original SARS from 2002. And what does SARS stand for? Severe acute respiratory syndrome. Acute just means very, like, right now. So it's causing this respiratory disease or syndrome that is kind of bad, and that's where SARS, the word, comes from. And CoV stands for coronavirus because they found the virus to be similar to other viruses of the corona family. So it just means in characteristics, it's similar to viruses of a specific family that cause cold, common cold in humans and other animals, specific strains of it, okay? And they called it number 2 because we already had a coronavirus that caused SARS in 2002. Now, the disease associated with the virus is called COVID-19, and that stands for Coronavirus Disease 2019, okay? So the idea is that SARS-CoV-2 or CoV-2 causes COVID-19. My analogy as a specialist in HIV will be that the same idea is that HIV is the virus that causes AIDS. Hopefully that makes sense to you. Again, if anything doesn't, feel free to ask me questions. I'm putting this crazy slide here, super busy, because this is from Wikipedia. Anyone who's gonna look up the coronavirus and try to understand is gonna see this slide. All I want you right now in this short time to get from this is the idea that this is the virus, okay, and it attaches to our cells. This is our cell right here that has this lipid bilayer membrane, and this is the inside of our cell. And the virus has these little spikes, these little clutches or antenna, and they can attach to receptors on our cells. And it's very specific to a type of receptor. In this case, it's AC2. ACE2 receptors on our cells. Certain cells have them. It will attach to it, and eventually, I'm not going to go into the details, to get into our cells. And why am I saying this? Why am I telling you this? Because what happens is once it gets into our cells, it uses our machinery, our proteins, our mechanisms to replicate and create a lot of viruses. So let's just say you have someone that's breaking into a factory because it wants to produce its own equipment, material, and the minute it uses all the machinery in that factory to make its things, its agenda, the factory is no longer producing the things needed for that factory, and that's actually what happens in us. Our equipment in those cells are being used to make viruses versus doing what it's supposed to do in that cell. And that means that if we have cells in our lungs that are supposed to be responsible for taking oxygen from the air and bringing it into our blood to supply us with oxygen, but instead of doing that, it's making viruses, then our functionality is being hindered. We are actually being affected, that we are not getting what we need out of these cells. And that is how this virus causes damage, okay? So that is the only point of the cell. I explain this more in depth when I give a full lecture. Transmission, you've been hearing, it's through respiratory droplets, okay? It just doesn't just float in the air. It's not an airborne disease, but droplets can be found in the air. So if someone is sick and is sneezing or coughing on his hand and then somehow touching a surface or touching you, and then you touch that surface or touch yourself and touch your face, that is how it spreads. We found statistically, it seems that it's most common to have spread between family members or people that live together, where there is higher cases of interaction and less of contact with surfaces. There has not been cases of getting the disease from a box from Amazon or AliExpress, but that doesn't mean you don't need to be cautious. It is also transmitted through feces, less something that we need to worry about in humans because we tend to go in a bathroom and use toilet paper or special toilet towelettes or whatever, but it is transmittable, and that may have been the initial cause of how it transferred zoonotically. Transmission from individuals that may have contracted the virus but not developed disease seems to be lower than people that actually got sick. If you have any questions, we could talk about this, and I'm not going to get into the other details. I do want to just mention, because people are talking about the therapeutics, there currently is no vaccine nor cure for the infection. So treatment is generally supportive care. What does this mean? If you think you're infected but you're not developing like really bad symptoms, still stay home, rest, hydrate, eat healthy, support your immune system. Stress doesn't help your immune system. Chill, hydrate, make sure you're resting, and allow the body, your immune system, to fight off this virus. Now, what is going on is they are treating with drugs that are for other viruses, other antivirals, to see maybe this will help. And they have seen some success with some of them. Remdesivir is a drug that is used for RNA viruses, Ebola, and this is an RNA virus as well, and that just means its genome is made of RNA and not DNA. They're thinking this may be beneficial. They also use chloroquine, and actually there are some promising results in the clinic. Chloroquine is against malaria, and they also, Coletra is an example of an HIV protease inhibitor, a drug for HIV. They're using this. I did not see any promising results clinically from this, but again, this is a new disease, so we don't really know much, and now it's actually being applied to clinical trials. So remdesivir and chloroquine are actually being tested in clinical trials right now. They don't cure the disease, they help support the body in fighting off the virus so that you can mitigate the more serious symptoms and let your immune fight it. So that's going on. There's also new directions of research looking at host targets. UCSF had a wonderful study that came out with a paper, and I actually joined on the meeting a couple nights ago. Well, it was daytime in the US. I'm not in the US, so it was nighttime for me. And they talked about it, and really the papers by, it was under the first authors from the Krogan lab, but basically it was a collaboration of over 20 labs, which means there were over 100 people that worked on it and did over 2 years of research in like a month, which is phenomenal to see such a collaboration. Another form of therapy that is being done is convalescent therapy, where they basically take antibodies from the blood of serum of individuals that got infected, sick, and got healthy, because we're thinking, well, now they have antibodies that are specific to this virus and are neutralizing, can fight off this virus, and they use this to treat people that are sick. In a way, it's almost like passive immunity, passive vaccination. So this is being checked as well. For the whole vaccine talk, this is gonna be at least a year or 2 years. Just the strategy of which type of vaccination we're going to do. Is it a dead virus? If it's going to be antigen based? And I'm not going to explain all this in this short time, but the idea is that once you do have a strategy and you develop it, then there's about 6 months of just like getting the approvals to run it through, because you can't just run it and inject people with it. So just that process would take at least a year, and then you need clinical trials. So a minimum of a year, probably 2. But that means it won't be for this season, so we still need to be careful. What does it mean for people who already got infected? You are most likely not going to get infected again. I'm not going to say 100%. Again, I'm a virologist, I'll never say 100%. But I will say that we right now believe there is immunity, and the cases where there was claim that someone got sick and got reinfected, it was either misdiagnosis, wrong lab results. So generally, if you got sick and recovered, you will not get sick from this virus, at least this season. We don't know how long the immune memory will last. If it will last for a year, for 4 years, it's a new virus, we don't know. And other than that, how do we protect ourselves? You kind of know this already. Hand washing, soap. They say for a minute. Well, soap is something that breaks down. It breaks down the membranes, the viral membranes. So 20 seconds of hand washing is good enough. They say a minute. So please wash your hands for a minute. Most likely it's you're not timing yourself, and when you think it's a minute, it's probably only 20 seconds. Other than that, maintaining distance from people who are coughing or whatnot. You don't want those droplets. You don't want them getting into your orifices, into your air pathways. Avoiding touching the face, like what I did now. I'm at home, I wash my hands. I also tend to always have antibacterial. Oh, and yes, these work. Aquagel, antibacterial. Here it has 68% alcohol. If you have something above 62%, this works. In my virology labs, we use 70% alcohol, and we work with viruses. I work with HIV, I work with BSL-3 labs, BSL-2+. So that is enough. If we use 70% in the labs, you know that 60% in this is fine. You can make it yourself. You can buy rubbing alcohol, mix it with water. If you have like a liter, then it would be 600 alcohol, 400 water. And it's mixed with water, okay? If you're suspecting that you're carrying the virus, please self-isolate. Wear a surgical mask so you are not spreading it as much. Seek medical advice, call ahead. Don't just show up, you don't want to spread it. And monitor your health for 2 weeks. Where is this 2 week coming from? Because we find that on average for about 12 days is when people will see the symptoms. So by then you will know if you're sick or not, okay? Other than that, again, my take-home message, it's like the cold or flu. Sanitation is key. Don't be hysterical. Be responsible. Share the knowledge that you have from good resources like me or like rules from the health services. And don't believe everything you hear on the news. Definitely don't believe everything you read on the internet. And even better, don't listen or read the news. You're not going to benefit from now. And feel free to contact me with any questions. Furthermore, if you want to, here's my email, by the way, henniz@yahoo.com. If you want to get the full talk for your organization or for your workplace, contact me. I am giving these talks. I really think it's important to get the proper information out there, and hopefully now you know a little bit more about the coronavirus and the current outbreak. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope to hear from you with questions, and stay safe and healthy.